Welcome into the Skinny Podcast. It's the weekly potpourri edition. I'm Richard Skinner, local12.com digital sports columnist and editor. With Rick Broering, as always, it's presented by Blake, the attorney Maislin. We've got the Kentucky Derby on the horizon this week. Reds baseball, which kind of came to a halt thanks to a rainout, really. That seemed to snap some momentum for them. We'll recap the draft and much, much more. And I think Xavier's trying to corner the market on 7-footers. Rick, how we doing?
We're doing well, Skinny. We got some Bengals Reds, and we'll definitely get a Kentucky Derby pick from you here today. Let's start with the Bengals draft. It did end up as a defensive haul of sorts. We had been talking about that leading up to it, but maybe not in the way that we expected or that a lot of fans expected. They also tried to shore up the offensive line some. We'll talk about that. They ended up with Texas A&M edge rusher Shamar Stewart as the first pick at 17th overall. From there, they went linebacker Demetrius Knight and guard Dylan Fairchild, followed by another linebacker Barrett Carter in the 4th round, then a tackle and a running back to round out their draft. So, Skinny, let's start here. Give me your first thoughts on Shamar Stewart, because this was a guy that in last week's podcast, you named specifically as a guy you didn't think that they should be looking at, despite looking at other guys at that edge rusher position. So now you've had more time they've picked him, you've dug into it, you've written about him, you've heard from him. What are your thoughts on the Shamar Stewart pick at this point?
Yeah, so I went on the 4 o'clock news on Friday, the day after the draft, to recap that pick and kind of preview that night's picks. And by the way, I did mock Demetrius Knight in the 2nd round that day, so that I come off smelling like a rose on at least one pick. And Adam Clemens, who did the interview with me, he asked me that kind of the same question you just did, and I said, honestly, if I didn't give you his stats, if you didn't know what he did at Texas A&M, and you put on like 3 minutes of tape, and I watched some of these highlights, just watch them, you'd go, oh my gosh, this dude's a freak. And he is. And then if I were to tell you that same guy somehow only had 4.5 sacks in 37 career college games, one of those against Bowling Green, a half against Sam Houston, you'd go, huh? I will say this. They didn't reach. He did have a first-round grade from literally everybody. I saw them take traits in Miles Murphy, and I know they think that the new defensive line coach, and maybe that's what they're betting on, is Jerry Montgomery and Al Golden can get more out of Miles Murphy. They can take this guy's traits and translate that into finishing plays, or at least being disruptive. I do think the other thing that I do like about the pick is he has rushed from the inside. And so I know a lot of people were talking about, draft a defensive tackle, and I think I discussed the reasons why I didn't think that was a prudent idea, because you've already spent some capital both in draft and money-wise. I know they don't have a true pass rusher there. Well, he can move inside. I mean, Joseph Osai's moved inside. I think what Shamar Stewart does is it kind of not only gets you that extra edge rusher you were looking for, and a guy with just incredible traits to do it and speed and all that, but also a guy that you can move inside on pass downs. It kind of kills 2 birds with one stone. So I still don't love the pick because I need more production. But again, just watching what he does some special things.
There are 2 numbers that are getting thrown around a lot. One is the 1.5 sacks last season, 4.5 sacks through his college career. The other is 39.5 pressures last season. Which stat means more to you? A lot of people are now trying to push back on the negative critics about the pick, saying, look, 39.5 pressures is production. What do you say to that?
Yeah, it's funny. We asked Luann, I think Kelsey Conway, the Inquirer, asked Luann Arumo late last season, because obviously they were having a hard time rushing the passer other than Trey. And she said, what's a metric you like? I mean, what is it good? Is it pressures? Is it hits? What tells you that you're being effective? He goes, sacks. Point blank. Now, it's a new defensive coordinator who maybe thinks pressures are a bigger deal, right? You remember all the pressures Carl Lawson got, but he didn't get sacks with some of those pressures. And a lot of people were up in arms that they let him walk to the Jets because he's this close to getting a bunch of sacks. Well, he never really did. And unfortunately for him, he got hurt. I still lean towards the production part of it. Now, the other thing I will say this, and again, I'm not in love with the pick, but I'm not going to completely pan it like some have, because it's easy to point to the 4.5 sacks. I mean, it's a raw number that's there, and it doesn't lie, and it screams he just can't finish. I think you'll agree with this, Rick. There's a lot of quick pass game in college, right? There's a lot of bubble screens,
sure,
a lot of just quick slants. I mean, there's a lot of quick game in college, to where twofold here. One, the positive, one, the negative. The positive is he getting pressures in the quick game that, he just can't get there because the ball's out of the quarterback's hands so fast? Or is he getting pressures in spots where they drop back and he just can't quite finish on dropback situations. So trust me, I'm not going to be crunch the tape guy on him all across the board and look at all of his snaps in his career. But I think there's some truth to that, the pressure part of it can just be disruptive. There's no doubt about it. But again, I still think sacks are the main deal for me.
Shamar Stewart, the individual prospect, I don't have strong thoughts on. I'd be lying to you if I said I paid a lot of attention to what he was doing last season in college football, and I had real thoughts about what or how his game is going to translate to the NFL. So I'm not overly negative about that. I hope it works out. There are obviously some things you can see there from a physical standpoint and on tape that's exciting. It's like, wow, hopefully he is able to tap into all that and really become something. But philosophically, Skinny, I have a major issue with this pick, and it's for exactly what we talked about last week on this show. Why do the Bengals always feel that they need to be the team to reach? And again, it's not a reach in the sense that people didn't have him graded this high. People did. But everyone said he is a untapped potential type of guy, a guy who hasn't shown the production yet, but has the tools, has the measurables. It reminds me a lot of a guy that the Bengals actually got, I believe, in through free agency. Maybe they even traded for him or something, but Taylor Mays. Remember the safety from USC?
Yeah. And in fact, he was such a tweener, and we used to laugh at this at camp. So they actually created a special package. They called it literally Taylor Mays because he was such a hybrid player. He had all those physical tools, looked like he was going to be a David Fulcher type safety, and he was a dud.
Right. And I'm not trying to say Shamar Stewart and Taylor Mays are the same thing or anything like that, but it's just always like these guys with all the physical tools. You've seen it so many times. They don't always work out just because you have the measurables. And the Bengals recently just did this with another pass rusher in Myles Murphy, who you can say is still has a chance to work out. But to this point, I don't think anyone is looking at that draft pick and saying, oh, the Bengals hit it out of the park. That was a great pick by them. It bothers me that they went down this road again. Now, maybe it'll work, and I'm really hoping it does. I'm not overly negative on Shamar Stewart, but just the idea that they went this route is annoying at best.
Well, I don't know if it's annoying, but I will say this. I think you're kind of getting to the point on this that I'm going to bring up. They just don't get the benefit of the doubt on a pick like this.
Exactly.
Because of so many times of missing on this. Listen, if this was the Eagles who took this guy, you'd go, they're genius. They're gonna make it work. The Bengals' two best defensive linemen are who, in your opinion? Across the board, not just who are the two best defensive linemen?
Trey Hendrickson.
Yep.
And
you're about to say it.
BJ Hill?
Yeah. So think about that. BJ Hill was acquired in a trade. Trey Hendrickson was acquired in free agency. The other guys that they've drafted, the jury's still out obviously on the two kids from last year. They think they're going to take the second-year bump, Chris Jenkins and McKinley Jackson, and maybe they do. But, literally their two best players they didn't draft, so they don't get benefit of the doubt. That's the thing here. The critics that come out of the woodwork for this, I think, are rightfully so from that standpoint that, you took John Ross because he was fast. You took Cedric Ogbuehi because of his length and some of the things he showed athletically. You don't get Myles Murphy, to your point.
Germaine Burton.
You don't get benefit of the doubt here, man.
That's just it. That's a much better way of saying it. Is like it's easy to put some faith in a guy like Shamar Stewart if it's another organization, if he's just a random name out there. But when you combine the Bengals' recent history of drafting, what they needed, the type of instant production they needed on defense this year, with a guy like Shamar Stewart, it's concerning. There's no way around the fact that it's concerning. That's the Shamar Stewart side of things. Obviously, there were 5 other picks.
I got one more point on this.
Okay, go ahead.
I think Tony Pike asked me this yesterday when I was on a segment with him and Austin Elmore on Cincy 360 of, does this draft pick affect the Trey Hendrickson situation in any way? And I think the answer to that is no. I think they were always going to take an end, whether Trey signed an extension, whether Trey keeps pouting, whether Trey plays. I mean, keep in mind after this year, Trey Hendrickson's contract is up this year unless they extend him. Joseph Osai is only on a 1-year deal. The jury's still way out on Myles Murphy. You did need to get the pipeline refilled at that position, in my opinion.
You did, but it's also an interesting point about Trey Hendrickson not being traded, because if you were trading Trey Hendrickson, do you think this is a pick you feel comfortable making?
That's a great question. I mean, obviously you'd have pigeoned yourself into taking an edge, and probably if you traded Trey, let's just say I did that one mock draft where I got a 2nd, 3rd, and 4th round pick in this year's draft back from the Detroit Lions, and I don't think any team would give up that much. But if you did, you almost definitively would dip back in the well again for a second edge rusher, right?
You'd think you'd have to. I'd also think you go for a guy that's maybe more NFL ready. in terms of his evaluations.
Yeah, no, or at that point, you probably had to go to the free agent market and get a veteran in here anyway.
Right. Skinny, they clearly tried to upgrade the defense, not just with Shamar Stewart, but across this draft. Do you feel confident that the Bengals are going to be a better defensive team next year based on what they've done here?
I'm going to go jury is still out until I see it. I do think, Al Golden was a linebackers coach here before he left for Notre Dame. He knows that linebacker room, and it feels like he looked into that linebacker room and said simply, I need new guys.
Yeah.
He still believes very much in Logan Wilson. He's talked glowingly of Logan. I'm still surprised Germaine Pratt, as of today, is still on this roster. I still think he gets cut, and then they hopefully do something with that $6 million we'll get to here in a minute. But I think he looked in that linebacker room and said, I need new guys. I need new blood. The other part, too, is as much as he likes Logan Wilson, Logan's only played a complete season once in his career. Now, he hasn't missed although he missed a large chunks of game last year, he's missed chunks of seasons. And so you don't even need just to replace whatever Germaine Pratt is. You need to maybe have somebody who can step in for Logan Wilson too. Maybe that's Oren Burks for all I know, the veteran that they signed. He'll figure into this mix as well. But I truly, he looked in that linebacker room and said, I need two things. I need new blood and I need maybe some versatility. And he talked about, maybe being able to take some of these guys, maybe a Carter or a Knight, and putting them as a 5-down line end on pass rush situations. And so I think that clearly they let Al decide, listen, I need that because, and we're going to get to this. I mean, he passed on Xavier Watts not once but twice, the safety.
That's a good point. That's the biggest takeaway from this draft for me was exactly that Al Golden must have really not liked the idea of having Germaine Pratt as a starting linebacker next year, or just in general, he felt like that position needed completely new blood in there, because for them to double dip at the linebacker position with only 6 picks, that was, I think, the most surprising part of this draft for the Bengals.
It's funny, though. Those two guys were the two guys I mocked in different phases in this draft, both Knight and mocked them in different rounds, mostly the third round. I think I might have done Barrett Carter once in the fourth round, but it's just funny that those two guys are the two guys I kept falling on.
How much concern is there in the secondary that they didn't take a safety I don't think many people expected them to go with a corner, at least not high in the draft, but that there was no picks in the secondary?
Yeah, I'm very surprised at that because Geno Stone and Jordan Battle did not play well last year. Jordan played better as the year went on. I think Geno did too, to be honest with you. And listen, I don't preach at the gospel of Pro Football Focus, but I do look at their numbers and I utilize them at times just because they give you at least a glimpse. I mean, those two guys were tied for the 136th ranked graded safeties out of 171 in the NFL. And so that's the best at the moment, because behind them are the following: Tyson Anderson, who has not played a single defensive snap in his NFL career; Dejon Anthony, who's played 11 defensive snaps in his NFL career, one of those, the ill-fated pass interference against Kansas City. And behind those two guys are 2 practice squad safeties. It screams that their plan is to go sign a veteran safety. It screams that there's not a lot of good ones out there, but it screams that that's what they not only are going to or have to do, but that maybe was their plan all along, that if it didn't fall their way safety-wise, that they were just going to wait until after the draft and go get a veteran. I'm still waiting on that. I can't imagine you're going into the season with the safety room like this. I just can't imagine it.
They go Demetrius Knight with their second pick, the linebacker.
Great story.
It feels like a reach based on character. Why was character and maturity such a big theme in this draft?
I think they're trying to get back to their roots. A couple of people in the media room dubbed it 2020 draft 2.0, that they were going for character guys, captains, guys who love ball. That's kind of what I wrote about after the draft. That was Zach Taylor's theme. And while that sounds hokey, that's kind of what the basis of that defense was built upon, and kind of that locker room was built upon, and they kind of had started getting away from that. The Germaine Burton red flag. We'll get to his story here in a second, because I saw him twice in the building over the weekend, which was odd. The Germaine Burton pick was a red flag. Sheldon Rankins came in and was a turd, and I know he got sick, but he was a turd. Honestly, he was cleared to play with some games left and just basically said, nah, I'm good. And kind of was the same way in the offseason program. And I think they just said, well, hold on, let's put a screeching halt to this. TJ Slayton, they knew, because Jerry Montgomery knew who he was. They signed him as a free agent. Oren Burks was highly thought of in Philly as a locker room. And then these draft picks on top of it. I think they decided we're getting back to our roots of what made us intangibly a good football team because of our locker room.
Is that a real thing you buy into, or is that it's good coach speak right now when you may not have enough talent?
I do. And again, like I said, Rick, when I did a full 7-round mock like we all did, and I always do this on a Friday morning after the first round because, sometimes that position taken changes the draft completely. I mocked the second and third round, and I got to it, and I just kept looking at the board and looking at the board. And I went, man, Demetrius Knight is an emerging talent, in my opinion. He's a guy who came to college as a quarterback, was moved to linebacker at Georgia Tech, really didn't flourish, decided to bet on himself and go play at Charlotte. He was a first-team all-conference player at Charlotte. South Carolina saw enough of him till he had 1 year of eligibility left thanks to the COVID year, took it, went to South Carolina, balled out on a really good defense, and I think he's continuing to just grow and emerge as a player. And I think, again, listen, I kept looking at that pick, and everything I looked at from my guy Dane Brugler, who I love, his draft guide, The Beast, to the NFL.com scout profile of him, literally had a third-round grade. And I went, no, I'm not passing on this guy in the second round. I'm going to go ahead and take him. And I did. And they did.
And the Bengals did too. Yeah. I one thing on the maturity issues, did you feel, and maybe other beat writers, was that something that was discussed last year? Did you guys feel like that was an issue in the locker room when you were watching this team and watching the season unfold? It
felt like that. Then you had the whole Ted Karras making everybody go outside. It was just the whole year was a weird vibe. I'm not going to tell you Jamar was a baby because he played, but that was an issue. It just felt like everything was just off the chain weird last year. And I think they decided, let's get back to what we are.
As far as Demetrius Knight goes, and I'm sure he's a great person, his character's off the charts, and maybe he will be a fantastic football player, but is there anything, and I mean anything, that brings the local media to its knees like somebody that does a rideshare app?
It's a great story, though. It's a great story. Come on now.
Well, I'm not saying it's not, but quite literally, you could have Satan, Hitler, anyone. If they came into the Cincinnati sports media and said, at one point I drove for Uber or did DoorDash, honest to God, the stories that would be written about them are off Matt Stainbrook, when he was at Xavier and that story came out, it was something we had to live with for 4 years. It wouldn't go away. Matt Stainbrook left and we were still talking about it.
Drew Chrisman didn't he do DoorDash on his bike?
Yeah, after he got cut. But that's how he crept into this podcast for the next 2 years.
Correct.
Yeah, the city loves it. I'm as guilty as any, I guess, for the Drew Chrisman stuff. But yeah, it was honestly shocking. It went from the Bengals reached on this linebacker with their second pick to Demetrius Knight is the greatest human being who has ever lived, next to Mother Teresa and Gandhi by Saturday.
So James Rapine in the media room, I love him. I call him Junior GM because he's got an opinion on everybody. I love him. So that day we went around the room about who would you take in the second round, and I said, you're gonna crucify me for this, but you know me, I don't care. I said I took Demetrius Knight in a mock, and he goes, oh my God, if they take him, I'm gonna kill him. He goes, he's an old man. I go, he's 25. Actually, it turns out he's gonna be 25. He's actually still 24 at the moment. And when they took him, he was going crazy. So then the next day that story came up. I said, he's now your best friend, isn't he? He goes, kind of grew on me.
I mean, it's incredible how quickly that narrative changed for not just James, but everyone in town was oh, this guy really? And then all of a sudden everyone talked to him one time. He mentioned that he drove for Uber or DoorDash or whatever it was. And the next 24 hours was Demetrius Knight is the greatest pick the Bengals have ever made.
He's hard. He's hard not to root for.
Sure. This is nothing against him. This is only a commentary on our local media.
No question.
Do you think Dylan Fairchild is likely to start at left guard immediately?
I think he's going to get every opportunity to do that. I really do. I know Zach has said a couple of times that he'd like to see Cody Ford settle into one position. I just don't know if that's his strength of starting 17 games at guard. I don't. I think he's a great Swiss Army knife, and I think he proved that last year by playing left tackle, by playing both guard spots, by playing right. I think that guy has value because, listen, you'll agree. I mean, if you get through a season with all your offensive linemen healthy and starting, that's a gift from the gods, right? I mean, that just doesn't happen. You can't bank on that, so you better have that guy.
Yeah, without a doubt.
The 5th round pick can be that guy. I think he's going to get every opportunity for that. I think if you penciled in right now, he would be, if you put a depth chart out, they don't like to put rookies first team, but if you put a real depth chart out where you want it to shake out, he'd be the left guard. Lucas Patrick would be the right guard. And then Cody Ford, Jalen Rivers would and probably Matt Lee, although the center they signed from are going to sign, they haven't signed him yet officially, Seth McLaughlin, who's an undrafted free agent. Maybe he beats out Matt Lee for that extra line spot. Maybe Lee stays up on game day because he can play center, whatever. I think that's kind of how this thing's going to shake down.
So the story goes Dylan Fairchild was a wrestler, and the Bengals offensive line coach is a martial artist.
Oh yeah, he actually has his own studio. He's a big jiu-jitsu guy. He uses jiu-jitsu in his teachings on the offensive line. He's part of what's called the strike system, and it's just an aggressive. It's a different. I'm so fascinated to watch him do drills and see what this stuff's all about when camps come along. But yeah, I mean, they fell in love with each other. It sounds like.
Why this seems like it's a new trend. I don't know if I love it. The thing was they put hands on each other. They went out there and they wrestled around, rolled around, and he needed to evaluate him by actually feeling how he moved and all that type of stuff, right? Well, then I'm reading last night on Mike Vrabel with the Patriots how he evaluated some guy, and they're saying Mike Vrabel went out in full pads and wanted to see what one of the offensive linemen had, wanted to test him out. So he went up, had on an offensive line. I don't know if I need that, Skinny. I don't think we need a new trend of coaches getting out on the field and wrestling with their prospects.
The last time a Bengals assistant coach said something along the lines of how he greeted a player and the impression he made was Paul Alexander telling us what a firm handshake Christian Westerman had. How'd that turn out?
Yeah, exactly. The pick that I think unanimously got the most praise for the Bengals was Taj Brooks, the workhorse running back that they took late in the draft out of Texas Tech. What do you make of that pick?
I make of it on a game day, he might not even be active this year. And I also make of it that there could be a time this year where he's a 100-yard rusher in the game. And I mean that sincerely. Chase Brown, if healthy, is clearly the guy, right? Like, it's not even a share workload anymore. He is clearly the guy. Samaje Perine's going to have his third down role, and Zach Moss will have a role as well, I would think. I mean, there could be game days, I guess, where Zach Moss isn't up either. But I think for right now, Taj Brooks is the fourth running back in the room, and you just don't bring four running backs up on game day unless one's a kickoff returner. I mean, you just don't do it. It's a waste of a roster spot. You're not going to get that deep in a game at the running back position. So I think it's a good pick. I think it's going to prove its worth at some point. But like I said, people shouldn't freak out that if it's the opening game and Taj Brooks is inactive, it's not a big deal. It's just a matter of numbers game. So to that point, like I said, I think there's going to be games where he's inactive this year, and there's probably going to be a game at some point where he's a 100-yard rusher. I think he's a really good player. I mean, having watched him a couple of times and certainly fairly intently when they played UC, I remember watching that game going, this guy's a dude. I didn't think anything about Bengals drafting him or his draftability. I just thought he was a really good player, and I think they got a nice value pick there.
Yeah, I was listening to Daner's podcast, and Mo Egger was on there. He had broadcasted that UC football game because Dan Horde was doing the Bengals game.
Yep,
and it was funny listening to him. I think he said something along the lines of, had I not had a stat monitor in front of me to remind me of how many yards he had, I kept thinking he had over 200, like every time he carried the ball. So, yeah.
One other thing on that, too, is Zach Moss restructured his contract, so he's on the roster. He still has not officially been cleared from that neck injury yet. Zach was asked about his status on Saturday, and he said he's progressing. So I think he's going to be fine, but I think this is also a little bit of insurance if things just don't work out from a health standpoint for Zach Moss either.
Draft grades. You love draft grades, Skinny. I know you do. Everyone loves draft grades. A guy named Renee Bugner, who's not from here. He's from overseas somewhere, but he compiled all the big draft grades, made a nice spreadsheet of them all, did a cumulative GPA for each team in the NFL.
Wow.
And the Bengals came in dead last with a 2.06 GPA, according to all these draft grades that are given out amongst the different outlets. Here are the other teams in the AFC North and where they came in the NFL, the place they came in according to their GPA. The Ravens were first in the AFC North and eighth in the NFL.
I thought they had a great draft.
3.39 GPA.
Yeah, I thought they had a great draft.
What stood out to you about their draft? What did you really like?
Just it felt like they got positional, like Malachi Starks falls to them. I mean, it just felt like guys that maybe were Bengals targets just kept falling to them in the right place.
And then right behind them at number 9 overall was the Browns, 3.33 GPA, taking 2 quarterbacks, Dylan Gabriel. They also got the Shedeur Sanders situation coming to Cleveland. We'll talk about that in a second because I do want to ask you a couple questions about that.
It felt like they traded every round. It felt like they must have had 1,000 picks in this draft.
They were active, which means the media people are going to like them. Whether they actually did a good job or not, media love activity.
No question.
Trades means you did a good job in the media's mind. Then 16th, the Steelers with a 3.39 GPA. So the Bengals way behind the rest of the AFC North, according to all the experts in with their draft. And really, they were behind pretty much everyone in the NFL. There was a pretty good separation there between the Bengals and the rest of the teams. I think a lot of it probably has to do with the fact that they went Shamar Stewart first and then probably reached with that second round pick in the minds of most experts.
But if I were to tell you, and this is not etched in stone, that team X, whoever that team is, that of their first 3 draft picks, one is going to maybe not start, but one's going to be in the rotation as a pass rusher. Because again, I don't think he starts. I think that's probably a Joseph Osai thing at the moment, but I do think he's going to be in multiple packages to play. And that you'd have 2 others come out of here as a starter, on all likelihood Demetrius Knight, and all likelihood Dylan Fairchild. Is that not a productive draft? Or does that just speak to you had holes to fill?
I mean, I guess it depends on if they're any good, right?
Yeah, no, right.
I think
here's the thing. Demetrius Knight is not going to start over veteran Oren Burks unless he's better than Oren Burks. And Dylan Fairchild is not going to start over Cody Ford if he's not better than Cody Ford.
And here's the problem that I have, well, not necessarily have, but the problem I could see coming up. Okay, Shamar Stewart's not only not starting for you at edge rusher, but he's not really a rotational guy. He's not really ready at all. So, okay, you just got another Miles Murphy situation there during his rookie season. And then you get on linebacker. Well, guess what? He doesn't beat Oren Brooks out. And now all of a sudden it's like he's kind of just a backup guy there. And then all of a sudden
Derek Carter does.
Well, if he does, great. But if you do, my point would be you had clear holes. As a good team that is expected to compete for the Super Bowl this year,
correct,
you had clear holes that seemed like they had to be filled in with starters right away. Well, and I can make the argument that you didn't get a single starter in this draft.
I mean, they feel, and a lot of places do, that Dylan Fairchild's a plug-and-play starter. That they weren't taking a guy that they're hoping is projects eventually. They're taking a guy they feel is a plug-and-play guy.
That's fine, but if you're going down to the 3rd round before you got to your plug-and-play guy with a draft that, again, a situation where you had a lot of clear holes, guys that you would have thought would have been obvious starters had you picked them, and there's multiple guys throughout the draft that were available that you could have said, if you draft him, he's almost certainly going to start for you, and the Bengals didn't opt to do that. So either they got it right with their evaluations, and these guys are better than most people project them to be, or more NFL ready than most people project them to be, or there are going to be some real questions when we get to the first couple of weeks of the season.
Well, and I know from a lot of the grades I've seen, people are panning them for not taking a tackle, and I keep bringing up the point of what's he going to do? What's this tackle going to do? They like McKinley Jackson. They like Chris Jenkins. BJ Hill's going to start. TJ Slayton is going. They're going to start side by side, those 2 guys. Then you got the 2 kids from last year. You're going to spend a capital again on that position for what? A 5th guy? Yeah,
that's an interesting one because I heard people and your colleagues, I mean, a lot of people complaining after the draft was over about the lack of a tackle and a lack of a safety, but more so the lack of a tackle. And they are very concerned about the lack of depth at that position, the lack of inside pass rush at that position. And you've been pretty steadfast all along as we've been leading up to the draft that the Bengals do not need more help at tackle. And more importantly, they're not going to spend more resources at tackle.
Yeah, I just, it just feels like you're throwing more at a position that, I mean, listen, I know they need more inside pass rush. I do. I think Chris Jenkins has the chance to do that. He didn't do it much last year. He only had 3 sacks. BJ Hill only had 3 sacks. But what is productivity for a middle guy? Is it getting better push? Is it getting sacks? I don't know. And again, I go back to Shamar Stewart rushed from inside in college at times. They feel like he can do that. And I think there's the positional value for him is the flexibility.
Can I say one more note on Shamar Stewart?
Sure.
The Zach Taylor quote of he had a lot of near production is quite possibly one of the funniest all-time Bengals NFL draft quotes.
Yeah, what is it? They had a chance to draft another Shamar in the 2nd round, and we were making fun of our guy Jeff Hobson, and he laughed. Said, "Can you imagine a team that had a Shama, and a Jama? That'd be pretty good."
That's pretty good. That's good. All right, Shedeur Sanders. We mentioned he ended up going to the Browns.
Hang on, somebody's calling me. Hang on a second. Hello. Oh, I'm going to the Saints. Hello. Guy just pranked me.
So a lot to get to with Shedeur Sanders. When did he end up getting drafted? 5th, 6th round? What was it?
5th round.
5th round. So he ends up going to the Browns. let's just start. What is your take on Shedeur Sanders and his chances in the NFL? Do you think this is like the NFL had it right and he should not at all be a legitimate prospect? Or do you think this is much more about other stuff, his father, the baggage, and you think he has a chance to be a really good NFL player?
I think he does have a chance. I mean, dude, he completed 74% of his passes, and you watched enough of him, right? He didn't exactly dink and dunk his way down the field.
No, I mean, and he had pressure constantly. Their offensive line was
back and launch that thing, and he had a lot of pressure. I know his arm strength's come into question. He's launched some bombs. Listen, I'm not good enough to evaluate that kind of stuff. I think he fell for this reason and this reason alone. I don't even think it's the dad or the baggage. I think it's from before the draft. Remember, Deion had talked even last year of, I'm going to dictate where my son goes. And there's been some conversations out there that he's told some teams that he basically just tanked some interviews. And he might have outright told some teams in the interview process, don't take me. So when you take the list of teams that had quarterback needs, right? Well, Tennessee's quickly off the board because they take Cam Ward. The Steelers did, but there's still the Aaron Rodgers situation that's hanging out there. Cleveland always needs a quarterback, right? I get that. I think it was alarming that he fell below Dylan Gabriel, but I think the teams that he might have told no went, okay, then I'll take Jackson Dart instead of you. And I think Jackson Dart might even be a better prospect. That's what the Giants took. That's who Brian Daboll was hoping to get and traded back to get and wanted.
And supposedly that was the big interview that he tanked. Yes. Like apparently him and Daboll had big issues during that interview.
Yeah. Okay, so when you take the list of teams that need quarterback, I listened to coming back Friday night, 1 o'clock in the morning, driving back from Paycor to home, Mike Tannenbaum, who I do like, who's on ESPN, a former NFL general manager, and he said, it's alarming that 32 teams have passed on this guy. Well, 32 teams didn't need a quarterback. The Bengals don't even need a backup quarterback. And you're not drafting a backup quarterback in the second round or the third round. You're waiting until the fourth or fifth round. Again, him falling below Dylan Gabriel was one where I went, oh boy, he may not even go at all. And then the Browns dipped back in and got him. I think it's nothing more that there was just not a big pool of teams that needed quarterbacks, and the pool shrinks even more depending on who he said, don't take me, right?
Yeah, it feels like there has to be a lot there in terms of the interview process and how he handled that and the way they view him, because
I don't think other GMs don't talk to each other about how those interviews went too, right?
Right. And we've seen guys slip before, Skinny, but maybe you have a better name in mind of a guy who was like projected to be one of the top 2 quarterbacks in the draft. And it wasn't like it was questionable. Pretty much everyone had him as a first round type prospect. Well, everyone had him as one of the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the draft. I don't even know who would have had him as a third. I think everyone has him as top 2 that I saw. And yet he slips all the way to the 5th round. And it was, very public and everything. It was a weird situation. I can't recall many like that.
So it's just such a polarizing situation, and there's no doubt.
And I don't really know why.
Well, it's Deion, the whole I'm going to dictate where my son plays. Who are you, man? You're not going to dictate anything. Shut up. I know
this is years after we've seen LeVar Ball. Like, this isn't that crazy or new at this point.
Yeah, but hear me out. And I heard an analyst say this, and I wish I could give credit where credit's due on this one. That, maybe all these people graded him high because they didn't want to draw the ire of Deion. That they just decided, we're going to put him up there. He's been productive. And yeah, I see all these flaws and that flaws and those flaws, but gosh, if I ding him to a second or a third round grade, I don't want to have to hear it. Now, Mel Kiper certainly went, he went to the mattresses for this guy. He had his rant on ESPN, so he still loves Shedeur. And I don't think it's because he's afraid of Deion. Maybe he is a third a round 3 grade. Well, round 3 grades can slip to the 5th round. And again, when the pool of teams that need a quarterback is small, and you've probably told a chunk of those, don't take me, there's just not a lot of opportunities.
If we're talking about like the media in Colorado or maybe some national football media that needed the Deion storyline, needed the Colorado storyline the last 2 years to get their clicks, okay, maybe those people were talking up Shedeur because of that. But the guys who do the NFL draft stuff, like the first chance they got from some anonymous number that was texting them saying they hear Shedeur slipping or he had bad interviews, they were crushing Shedeur and Deion as soon as they can. So I don't think there's any hesitation to crush these people, and specifically a high-profile one and one that draws attention like the Sanders family. So I find it hard to believe he was getting extra credit from NFL scouts or draft analysts because they wanted Deion Sanders on their good side. I think a lot of it has to do with I truly believe it's the LeVar Ball situation, the Dion being his dad, them both being braggadocious, in your face with it, talking about how they don't want to go to certain teams when maybe they shouldn't even be picking and choosing where they're going to go based on how it played out. I think a lot of it was that, and I'm fascinated to see it play out because watching him play college football, I don't think he's a surefire can't miss prospect, but watching him compared to a lot of the other quarterbacks in this draft, I do think he has a real chance to be an NFL prospect. And there was a point when it got to the third or fourth round, I'll admit, I sent a text out to a few of my buddies saying, is there any world in which the Bengals consider just taking a fourth or fifth round Shedeur Sanders, knowing that you can talk up how good he looks behind Joe Burrow and then try to trade him to one of the teams that need a quarterback?
I asked that of somebody in the building, and they said if that was the case, you don't want the circus to be your backup quarterback. And I think that's what it would have been. It would have been a circus.
I think the Bengals and the Bills, and there's like 4 teams where it wouldn't have been a circus. And this is one of the only places where it wouldn't have been. And you could talk him up like, oh, he looks great behind Joe Burrow. Yeah, he's learning from Joe. He's great. They work together. You could really sell that up and use it as a way to sort of up his value before trading him away this offseason when one of the teams inevitably gets into camp and their starting quarterback that they're planning on gets hurt. But
yeah, I mean, I will say this. I think he fell into a good situation in Cleveland where he will have a chance to maybe prove his worth pretty quickly, that he's not only better than Dylan Gabriel, that he's better than Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco. It's not exactly like a stellar quarterback room that you got to go beat out.
No, he can definitely win the starting job there. The problem is when you have a guy in his situation where you're kind of going against the odds, do you want to be doing it in Cleveland, and do you have any faith that he'll pull it off in Cleveland?
I mean, it's a quarterback graveyard for a reason, right?
It is. It ran his dad told us that all before the draft ever happened, and lo and behold, we're going to hold him to that. What did you think of the prank calls? Because everyone's all worked up about this, and I have a hard time getting that worked up about it.
No, I don't know, man. I think that was mean-spirited. I really do. Listen, I love a good Jerky Boys. That's one of my favorites. I still occasionally get on a YouTube wormhole and laugh my ass off at Jerky Boys stuff because I do think it's just outlandishly funny. This was just downright mean, in my opinion. And you know, the kid's a dumbass for doing it. He's a bigger dumbass for doing it by taping himself or having somebody tape him doing it where you could see his face and eventually know it's him. The fact that and this is funny. I've asked a bunch of writer friends this, one that used to work for a team. I said, I didn't realize they gave draft picks special phones. I honestly didn't know. I
didn't know that either until this.
That was a revelation to me, to be honest with you. And so the kid was then even dumber because it was going to be easy to trace back. I mean, what a dipshit. So now his dad gets fined $100,000. I don't know if that's right or wrong. Tell you what, if I'm the dad, I'm putting my boy on an installment plan. You're paying me that stuff back, buddy.
So here's the thing. I'm not going to get all that worked up about a prank call. Actually, I think it was Shedeur Sanders' best moment of the weekend. The way he handled that.
He handled great.
Under incredible pressure and you're in a terrible mood at that point. For him to handle it like it was no big deal and look totally poised and like this is just part of the deal, I thought that was a wonderful moment for him to show off to teams at that time. So I didn't think it hurt him at all. I do think it's mean-spirited. It sucks that it happened to him, but man, I don't know. I think we're getting a little soft if we're acting like this is the end of the world. And so I think the kid should be reprimanded. In fact, I'd like if his dad got fired. I think that's absolute BS that his dad would let his son get that number. You're going to tell me he went into your iPad and somehow hacked into it and found it? I'm not buying that. You thought it would be funny. You were being careless enough to let your son get that number. You probably knew it was going to happen if I had to guess. I'm not buying any of that stuff. I think he should lose his job or be fined more than $100,000.
Really? See,
yes. But I don't think it's that big of a deal. I also think it's funny. I wouldn't have done it. I think it is mean-spirited, but it's also it's a freaking prank call, man. It's a prank call. We used to do that to everyone before cell phones with caller ID was a normal thing. And it wasn't like you ding dong ditched, you prank called. Get over yourselves if you're that worked up about it. No one got hurt.
You got Prince Albert in a can? Better let him out.
Your refrigerator's still running? Better catch it.
Yep. I'm noting you. Again, I listen, I'm not over the moon of this. I'm not going crazy, but I do think it was mean-spirited. I do think that. And honestly, if I'm his dad, though, you're paying me back, buddy boy.
Hell yeah. I mean, if it's true that he really stole the number and got it all without his dad ever knowing anything, then man, that's a tough situation with your son. You got to find a real way to punish him there. The Reds The Reds went on a 5-game winning streak immediately after our last podcast, Skinny. And then right before it was time for us to record again, they dropped 2 in a row on the same day, got smashed by the Cardinals in a doubleheader on Wednesday. They'll play the final game against the Cardinals here in just a few hours. We're recording this on Thursday morning. They're currently tied with the Brewers for second in the NL Central at 16-15, 2 games back of the Cubs. Skinny, I want to start with talking about Noelvi Marte, because it feels like he's been a huge part of this recent surge up until the back-to-back losses yesterday. He's slashing 373, 593, 965 with 3 homers, 16 RBIs, 4 stolen bases. Obviously, he didn't start with the team at the beginning of the year, so that's all been done in a pretty short succession here, about 13 or 14 games now. What do you make of this resurgence? How legitimate is it? And how important is this for the Reds, given the situation that they're in with not only Jeimer Candelario, but also you've got a couple of young prospects in Cam Collier and Sal Stewart, who you might be thinking about bringing up in this situation too early if a guy like Noelvi Marte isn't producing?
I think a couple of things. I think last year, I think you just have to turn the page on it. It was wonky from the time he got suspended to the fact that he didn't hit worth a damn in Louisville, and they still decided to bring him up. I don't think they gave him enough time to kind of get his act together. Then he came up here and pressed, and then he had defensive problems because he had mechanical issues throwing the ball. I think it all compounded itself into just one awful half a season that he played. He's still a highly regarded prospect. He played really well when he came up in 2023. I think that's closer to the player that he is. I think to his credit, when they sent him down to start the year, he could have gone one of 2 ways here, right? He could have gone sideways of woe is me, and instead he went down there and raked. And they fixed his mechanical issues throwing the ball in spring training. He still has some issues, but they've seemed to fix that, and probably that gave him a confidence boost that he's not carrying his at-bats to the field. He's not carrying his problems in the field to the bats, and they all kind of marry each other. And I think it's been a big revelation. Is he going to hit over 300 the rest of the year? I don't know, but I don't think he's going to be the guy that we saw last. I think last year was just honestly an aberration.
Yeah, that'd be huge. I mean, they really need another offensive piece to step up and keep playing well here. Hopefully he can be that guy.
And how important has Austin Hayes been to the lineup? And, he gets hurt. Now he's out of the lineup. They don't score again.
That was literally the next words out of my mouth was going to be Austin Hayes has kind of been the guy leading them at the plate so far. And then he tweaks his hammy running the bases and scoring in the 6th inning on Monday. He had an MRI. I don't think they have any new updates. They didn't as of yesterday before the games.
I looked right before the podcast. I didn't see one if there was one. If there was, I missed it.
Yeah, same. So we don't know what the extent of it. Still seems like it's day to day, but obviously hamstrings can be a tricky thing sometimes. So we'll see where it goes from there. Hopefully that doesn't completely kill the momentum he had at the plate. Chase Petty, though, he gets called up, gets to make his MLB debut. It was a rough one. 9 earned runs in 2 1/3 innings. Did strike out a couple of batters. What were your thoughts on Chase Petty?
Disappointed. I mean, I wasn't expecting 6 shutout innings, but boy, that was really disappointing because he's pitched well. He's pitched his way up the chain. It was a straight trade back in whatever that was, 2019 or 2020, when they got him from the Twins, a former first-round draft pick, and that was actually
Castillo.
No, it was either It was either Malley or Sonny Gray. It was Malley.
Gray. It was Gray.
Oh, it was okay. Yeah, you're right. It was Sonny Gray. You're right. And it felt like that was the start of here's the rebuilding process. You're trading a qualified all-star starting pitcher for a kid who's still a teenager and still in A-ball. In fact, I don't even know if I think he'd been in rookie ball, whatever. But former first-round pick, they were trying to then stockpile some talent. And to his credit, he's gradually moved his way through the system, and here he was. And, oh, boy, that was – I'll take it as let's see more. My bigger concern is they've got a real Alexis Diaz issue, don't they?
Well, he blew up again in the 9th inning. I honestly, at this point, I think Alexis Diaz is done. I do too. Kind of already felt that way. This was just another sort of nail in the coffin for him, I think.
I guess what has happened to him?
Well, I think the fact that he couldn't throw a strike for a long stretch there really kind of ruined him. And then trying to get back, it's just like he doesn't have – if he does throw a strike, he doesn't have any stuff. He's just getting hammered.
And that slider's awful. It just sits there and says, hit me as far as you can hit me.
Yeah, he hangs all the breaking stuff if he throws them for strikes. And if he doesn't, then guys just aren't swinging, and he's completely at a loss there. So I really just don't see a path back for him. I think he's done.
And I think Terry Francona's tried to manage that to try to get him back. Like get him in – although that was a fairly high-leverage situation, 1-0 ball game in the 9th. But he's been trying to get him into –
But a weird
inning.
situation with the doubleheader. I mean,
right. And it was correct. And I think at the point, unfortunately for Alexis Diaz, once it started to compound itself, it's like, we got another game today. You're out. You're going to have to eat this one, my man.
Yeah, you're going to have to get us through it. Going back to Petty, though, he got hammered, obviously. You give up that many runs in 2 1/3. The sinker, though, he keeps the ball down. I mean, he relies on that sinker and he keeps it low. You would feel like that's a recipe for success in Great American Ballpark. Obviously, it did not work out at all for him in his debut, but overall, his pitching style, I kept watching thinking, it feels like this should be a style for this ballpark going forward, but it's going to take more opportunities. One game isn't going to tell us enough, but it didn't go well. He is the 6th best prospect in the organization, so there are obviously high hopes for him.
Yeah, I'm anxious about getting Rhett Lauder back here at some point.
Exactly. Yeah, it would be interesting to see if you could get Petty going a little bit, to have your top prospect and your number 6 prospect both with the major league team pitching at the same time.
And I'll tell you this, Chase Burns ain't too far behind, I don't think.
Yeah, and Green and Lodolo are great. I mean, like, what Lodolo's doing is now almost matching Green at this point, and they're both they've been fun to watch this year. So if you could get those young guys going mixed in there with them, it'd be a really exciting summer from the pitching rotation standpoint, which brings us to my next point, which last year the Reds they finished April at 16-14. Right now they're sitting at 16-15. This year they were a half game worse, as I mentioned, but last year they went on to lose 10 of 11 games to start the month of May. They finished May with just a 33% winning percentage. What do you think they're positioned better this season going into the month of May and getting into the summer here?
I do, because I think that was the point where Lodolo got hurt, if I'm not mistaken, towards the end of April, and it felt like there were some other things that crept up, unfortunately, for them. And I do, to your point, and I think it goes back to the rotation. I mean, I don't think you're going to go all the way through this rotation of Green, Lodolo, Abbott, Brady Singer, Martinez, if that's the group, and have 5 bad outings. I don't see lengthy losing streaks. And I see, again, to the point of get a couple of wins on the back end of the rotation, turn it back over to where you're back to Green and Lodolo, and there you build a 5-game winning streak.
Yeah, it was interesting looking back at that record coming out of April last year, because I think a lot of the sentiment this year has been, they're playing better baseball. They look better than they did a year ago. And it's like, well, actually, this time last year, they were right in the same exact spot, basically. So it really is going to depend what happens from here. It feels like they're in a very similar spot. And maybe the NL Central is a little bit more open for.
Yeah, the only thing is the Cubs played every game they played in April was against the team with a winning record, and they came out of that still leading the division.
So there you go. Not great for the rest of the NL Central. One of the big things last year, Skinny, was the 1-run games. They were 15-28 in 1-run games last year. So far this year, they're 3-5. Obviously, not enough of a sample size to have a huge opinion there. But do you feel like that's something we're going to be talking about again all year this year?
Yeah. In fact, remember when I made the prediction, I thought they'd win the division. I brought that up. That hopefully with a new manager, hopefully with health, you turn those 1-run games. I mean, turn 6 or 7 of those 1-run games around and just get back to maybe even 501-run games. Last year's record would have been obviously far better, and I think that I think that will change. I think just also the law of averages will change that a little bit too, right? Sometimes 1-run games are luck. Maybe you backdoor your way into a 1-run loss, like you're down 5 and you score 4 and you lose by a run. Well, is that really a 1-run game? I guess it is, but I think of 1-run games as 3-2 going to the 9th or 5-4 going to the 9th, one way or the other. I think law of averages kind of changes that a little bit too.
Any other thoughts on the Reds or what's going on with them right now?
No, I mean, to their credit, they got you back to being interested again, right? I mean, it felt like for a while this was just a boring team to watch, but the stretch that they play gets you back interested a little bit. That's a good thing. Hey, I do want to go back, and I totally forgot. I mentioned the Germaine Burton thing. I know I'm going to.
Oh yeah, I totally skipped over that. I'm sorry.
You're good. So Thursday, they allow us into the cafeteria that somehow gets an F- from the players. That I think is just fine. Everything's fresh. It's cooked fresh. I don't know.
I need a video series where you tour all the cafeterias in the NFL.
Yeah,
that would be fantastic content.
I like that idea.
Come on, WKRC, step it up.
So I'm in the salad bar line, and I turn around, hear a guy get a plate behind me, and I'm not thinking anything of it. I kind of look. I'm like, "It's Germaine." He goes, "Hey, man." I said, "How you doing?"
How's the house hunting?
Well, I'm wondering if I'm serious about this. I wonder if he lives there.
Chad Johnson.
Because then, lo and behold, on Saturday morning, a handful of us were in there getting a cup of coffee and getting a quick bite to eat, or like 11:15. The draft starts at noon, and lo and behold, there's Germaine Burton, and he looked good. He looked alert. Somebody asked him, why are you here on a Saturday? And he said, I'm just trying to stick to a routine. And to me, maybe this is going to turn out to be a fascinating reclamation project, that either he got the help he needed, the Bengals helped him get the help he needed, and he's trying to turn things around. He looked far more organized. He didn't look disheveled. He looked well rested, which times last year he looked like he had just come off of a 5-day bender and hadn't slept for a month. And again, I never will doubt anybody until the last instance. I mean, I'll give the kid another chance here, and it feels like he realizes he's got no more chances. Like, this is it, man. Either you do it the right way, or you're going to be out of this league so quick you won't even know what to do with your life.
Yeah, it's either that or he was going to be in a cardboard box of the hot air intake if he didn't
Correct.
take the reach out from the Bengals and live there, because it seems like he's having a hard time staying with a roof over his head.
No question.
Well, that's an interesting little nugget there from the draft weekend at Paycor Stadium.
Listen, I didn't see another single player there that weekend, nor should they have been there. Everybody's like, what are you doing here, my guy?
I think you pretty much nailed it. I think he's living there. That sounds like the old Chad Johnson situation, although Chad was doing it allegedly to save money. Germaine Burton's doing it because, he can't keep an apartment.
Correct.
Ask Skinny anything. Your Kentucky Derby pick, let's get into this first. Did you hit last year? I feel like you did. Mystic Dan?
I hit the exacta last year, if I remember right.
I think so too. Yeah, I feel like you had that. So, and you've been hot this year. You had the Masters pick. So what do you got for us on this year's Kentucky Derby?
All right. So part of this is with just going on gut and everything. Listen, if I don't box journalism and publisher in an exacta box, I'm just an idiot. Journalism hasn't paid off for me so much. I need journalism to pay off for me here.
That is literally I don't know how many journalists there are in America, but that is what all of them are going to be saying this weekend.
Absolutely.
So if this horse pulls it off, you'll have some of the most fantastic pieces of horse racing writing we've ever seen.
Now, journalism is, though, by the way, the morning line favorite at 3-1. I looked at early Kentucky Derby betting this morning, and he's floated up to 4-1. That's the beauty of the Derby. I mean, you can get a favorite with some value still, and he's legit. I mean, he's got the top two highest rated buyer speed figures in the race. He won 2 Grade 2 stakes race. He won the Grade 1 Santa Anita Derby. He's got a running style that I think is suited for this race, where there's a ton of speed in front, and he can probably just lay in a good spot and pounce. And Publisher's 30-1, but he finished second in the Arkansas Derby. Again, that's going to be my gut box. I'm going to box those two gut-wise. A couple other ones that are interesting, though. There's a Japanese horse, Luxor Cafe. He's out of American Pharoah, Triple Crown winner. He's 15-1, and I did read this somewhere, and I think the person who wrote it's right. The Japanese keep sending horses here consistently. At some point, they're going to break through with the win. And it's always hard to handicap them because you don't correlate. It's hard to correlate what they do over there to what is run over here, where you can literally look at buyer figures and you can look at similar races and you can look at some horses coming out of the same stakes race heading into the Derby. These are always hard, but I do think he's interesting enough to put in some kind of exacta box. The Ruby Stakes winner is interesting. Final Gambit, 30-1. It took him 3 times to break his maiden, but it seems like he just keeps getting better and better. Sometimes hard to handicap coming off the all-weather track like Turfway has, but I do like Final Gambit at 30-1. Another one is Burnham Square, who's the Bluegrass winner. He's 17-1. And then Sandman, the 17 horse at 6-1, won the Arkansas Derby. So give you some prices, but journalism on paper really looks like a standout in my opinion, and I'm going with him. Again, it's a tight-end bet for me, but it just feels like God is giving me a horse that's going to give me a win.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that feel that way right now, and that's going to keep me off of it. It is a great name, and by all accounts, a great horse. I like Burnham Square.
Yeah, I do too. I got him in there.
Yeah, I think that's one you got to play with in a couple of different bets, but I think that might be the horse just to take straight up too. As a winner.
17. I think 17-1 morning line, or maybe 17-1 now is where he sat when I looked this morning. Nice square price on a Bluegrass winner.
Yeah. All right, we got one other question for you.
Yep.
House Fresh recently released the results of their study of the dirtiest cities in America. The top 10 were Baltimore, Sacramento, Charlotte, LA, Memphis, Boston, San Antonio, Kansas City, Buffalo, and Dallas. How shocked is Skinny that Dayton was not number one?
No, how shocked is Rick Broering that Dayton is not number one?
I was going to say, I don't know if they're confusing our voices or if they just wanted to knew I would be asking the question, so they just wanted it to be out there. But yeah, that I'm absolutely stunned that Dayton is not on this list.
It's funny. So I have my best friend from high school who lived 3 doors down from where you are, or where you grew up. He lives in a suburb of Dallas, and it's just beautiful. It's so clean and nice and fresh and new. I haven't ventured to downtown Dallas in quite a long time. I don't know how dirty that, but it's just funny that you hear about the cities, but sometimes that's why I guess the suburbs are what they are. It's where people flock to, right? That the suburbs are so much better than being in the city.
Well, this person also says, besides Dayton, what is the dirtiest city that you've been to?
Baltimore's pretty grungy. I will tell you, Baltimore's pretty grungy. I'm not going to lie.
It's number one on this list.
Yeah, it's pretty grungy. Now, I will say it's grungy in the parts I've driven through, but also when I go there where the stadium is, I always stay in the Inner Harbor, and the Inner Harbor is absolutely beautiful. Around Camden Yards and the football stadium is absolutely tremendous. I like the downtown part of the downtown area is awesome. But there's parts I've driven through, it's like, ugh.
Again, top 10, Baltimore, Sacramento, Charlotte, LA, Memphis, Boston, San Antonio, Kansas City, Buffalo, and Dallas, dirtiest cities in America. Are there any cities in the top 10 that surprise you?
San Antonio, I guess. I don't know why it does. I've only been there once in my life, and I don't remember it being dirty.
Yeah, that one surprised me a bit too, because it feels like most people really talk highly of San Antonio, the Riverwalk, the downtown area there.
Yep.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised by that one as well. I didn't see any others that really stuck out to me. Maybe Charlotte. I wasn't necessarily expecting Charlotte to appear on that list just because people seem to love it.
That's where I broke my elbow, so it's always going to be a city I hate for that reason. But we stayed downtown, and I thought everything was very walkable until you trip and fall and break your elbows.
Interesting choice of a term there.
I kind of like the downtown Charlotte area we were in. There are a ton of nice little bars. Our hotel was nice. It felt clean around that. So yeah, I guess it depends on, you're talking like a 5 square block area of a city that you consider the downtown. And that's probably pretty grungy in certain parts.
Yeah, it's like every city probably has its dirtiest area that would rival a lot of cities, and it's good areas.
Downtown that you don't want to go to.
Yeah, exactly. All right, that's all we got today.
All right, all good stuff. Appreciate it as always. We'll be back next week. Good luck on your Derby wagers. I need journalism to pay off for me. Well, hopefully you will. For Rick Broering, I'm Richard Skinner. It's been the Skinny Podcast, the weekly Potpourri edition presented by Blake, the Attorney Maislin.